Heyo! Hey! What's up? Hey guys, Slacker here. It's been a long time since I've done a long-form video review or posted on this channel, but I've been playing this game a lot, and I've been thinking about it a lot, possibly more than anyone that's ever touched it, so I wanted to do this video. Talk about Floodland. It's developed by Vile Monarch. It's a survival-centric settlement builder in the vein of Frostpunk. It's warmpunk. That's kind of fucked up. Alright, so let me give you my disclaimer right now. Frostpunk was my return to that kind of game, where it's like you build a city in a tone that's a little bit higher pitched than your SimCities or your City Skylines. Since the days of executing rebels in OG Tropico, and I like it a lot. So there's some sort of bias at play there. I forget exactly what type of bias it is. But the comparison's kind of in the air, you know? Some people that worked on Floodland also came from Frostpunk, working at 11-Bit Studios. The two were bundled together in a Societies of Tomorrow sale on Steam. And I'd argue that most, if not all, of Floodland's players probably came from Frostpunk. So, you know, I'll just go with it. Now, I have played Frostpunk enough, hopefully, to be able to properly articulate what I like so much about it, what it's doing well, and how it can serve as a template to build from, how you can take inspiration from it but also do your own thing. So that's a good thing for Floodland because there are mechanics in place that I know I'm probably going to like, but also a bad thing for Floodland because they may not be as interesting for someone who randomly discovered this in their discovery queue. Well, that being said, how is Floodland? How is the game? What's it like to play? Okay, so I hate this game. But curiously, I don't dislike it. See, if you were to take everything that Floodland does, mechanics, aesthetics, all that, listen to a document, on the surface, a document would be interesting, maybe even compelling. But I'm so curious and so frustrated about how these things are put together. Now, to properly articulate that is the second goal of this video, because I get to talk about Frostpunk. But I will need to be as fair and as thorough as possible, so I'm going to go into the minute-by-minute minutia of both games. So beware of spoilers, and also beware of this video being very, very boring. That being said, let's hop in. So let's boot up Floodland and start a game. You are presented with 8 starting clans. Previously there were 4. Now there's some lore here if you want it about how these guys came to be following the climate catastrophe that resulted in the setting of this game, but there are 3 important things here. Each clan has perks. This clan will search faster, this clan will produce more water, this clan will eat less food. But you just started playing this game, so you probably have no idea what any of this means. Each clan also has one of those political compass doohickeys. Clans can either be Old World or New World and then favor unity, or authority, or liberty for 4 basic political profiles. Essentially, are we looking forward or backward, and are we all about personal freedoms or about civil obedience? Or else, no, you're not an aristocratic neo-monarchist, you're a CVS clerk in Des Moines, Iowa, versus I'm 19 and I just took a sophomore liberal arts class and now I think better than Frantz Fanon. The third thing to note is that each clan is represented by a leader shown off in some great looking portraits in a kind of streaky marker style. I like them, but get used to seeing these guys. So you might be thinking that this is your character and these are your people. You'd be wrong. But whatever, let's choose someone that may or may not provide a useful boost to my playstyle and start the game. A pretty opening cinematic plays. Narration explains that unrest consumed the world and then disaster struck. Whatever.
The event was the cause, but it all began long before. I remember the times of confusion and strife. I heard the silence that drowned the screams.
Despite the bummer story, that of another death in the community causing the narrator to reminisce about his sister dying, and then tying that to the greater message of a huge disaster changing society for those that survived, he is confident and optimistic about the future, and I guess we'll see if that comes true.
And ahead, I see hard-working hands building houses. I see strong backs carrying food. And smiles. The smiles that greet newcomers.
You start with the pathfinding camp, which you can command to do 3 tasks. You can pick up resources that have been discovered within the fog of war, you can send scouts to explore outwards to the perimeter of the camp zone, or you can search inside buildings for resources and people. Members of your clan pulled a rainy days and went off on their own, got lost, and decamped in a nearby ruined building. You have to find them to add them to your workforce once you've gathered some food. They lost most of their equipment and resources when their boats sank in the storm. Now they're happy to join us, but they need to be sure we have enough food if they're going to be part of our settlement. They say they can manage on their own for a while and they don't want to be a burden. Right. From there, you set up a central storage area for your resource hub, gather some trash around you, and build some basic life-supporting infrastructure, like tents and water filters, because the flood around you needs to be converted into potable water. The early game resource to prioritize is rubbish, which you can stably collect from huge piles that wash ashore using a sorting hut. Alright, let me say this right now. This game looks great. Initially things look jaunty but not overly cartoonish. The coloration here is like purples, greens, and reds, and they convey to me like the warmth of the environment, but also a sort of forebodingness. And even like the iridescent streaks of color from gas and oil in the water actually look kind of pretty. Disaster happened here, but not devastation. Like there are ruined buildings, but not bodies. So it's not dreary or depressed or depressing so far. Pick whether or not you want to supply your people with fish, which need to be cooked to be eaten safely, or mushrooms, which can be swallowed clean from the stem. Then build your food supply. Most resources in this game are renewable. They grow back after you collect them, so fully depleting an area is not really an option. And these 2 food options are, indeed, renewable. You're soon asked to build a study, which is an ugly, ugly, ugly building. The default mode for the study is researching old world artifacts, which you will collect in the surrounding floodland for technology points. Each one gives 10 fungible units of technological know-how. Let's take a look at that technology screen. Okay, so Floodland implements both a technology wheel of progression and a technology tree, separated into 4 different sections like survival and well-being. To unlock the ability to spend points on a new building or new upgrade, you first must unlock the corresponding material technology, making this a big-ass sink for resources and technology points. Now, is recycling concrete from rubble more of a technological feat than resmelting plastic? Well, the game certainly thinks so, even if certain building unlocks don't actually require the materials that unlock it to construct it or operate it. I don't like this. I don't like it. I think a straightforward tech tree would be cleaner. You're then asked to research the ability to read books. Now that we're literate, these books are used to generate experience for your clan. Staff the study with clan members you want to gain experience. The blue bar at the bottom of the clan leader's profile shows the level of experience, and once filled, you can level up one of 5 disciplines. The idea here is more advanced workplaces require more than just general labor, and you need specializations to get the most out of them. Again, this idea makes sense in a bubble and could lead to possibly compelling tactics, like you could just level up one discipline and that'll give you the most efficient outcomes from the workplaces that utilize that specialization. But obviously that requires a lot of books because it gets exponentially more difficult to get experience once you've leveled shit up. You know how experience works. Or else you could level up all your disciplines and be the most capable clan in the land. But I would ask you not to look too deeply or at all into what specialization does what. I would go to the technology screen and then work backwards from there to figure out what you need. Now you gotta send scouts into the Floodland to see who else is in the area. This should be very familiar to those who played the A New Home scenario in Frostpunk, or else everyone who has played Frostpunk. One of the first things you're asked to do in that scenario is to research and build a beacon so that you can send out scouts into the Frostland. So here, you establish another storage depot near a ruined radio tower and set about gathering the resources to restore it. See, resources need to be physically brought from workplaces to the storages to be used, and building requires those workers to take what's needed from storage to the build site, and those workers can only go so far. When you build, you're essentially signaling that you want this thing here. No resources are spent just then, because they need to be transported by your storage workers. This takes some getting used to, because in almost any other game, what's needed, be it capital or stored materials, they're usually spent immediately when you build. Floodland essentially lets you, overdraft your resources. So here's what you should roughly have by now at least. You should have 2 storage areas, several tents, a way to get water, a way to get food, possibly a way to cook risky food into safe meals, a way to gather rubbish, and a study. Now you send out a radio wavelength and the tower will, I guess, geolocate a specified resource or people out in the wastes. Now you create a pathfinding camp, give them some rations to take along their journey, and send them out. For this mission, you will go to an abandoned factory where you will find another clan. Welcome to Floodland's clan system, where pretty much immediately you'll be getting the message that the relationship between Clan A and Clan B is starting to deteriorate. This notification pops up all the fucking time. And it's one of the few things from this game that actually has meme potential. And even then, it's not very good. Son of a bitch. The clan relationship screen is possibly the clearest and cleanest laid out screen in this game. You should be able to figure out where clans stand with each other at a glance, illustrated in this, I don't even know what you'd call this, like a 180-degree scatter plot. Like a half-galaxy diagram. If I were to illustrate my own relationship with this clan system, I'd probably be around here. It's not like I don't get it, but, I don't get it. Throughout multiple games, throughout multiple saves, I have never figured out how to utilize this system effectively. You can see a small list of the variables that contribute to the equation for either clan friendliness or hostility. I think the default impulse for every clan is to be negative towards one another. That's totally fair. That's actually real shit. But if this is a concern, especially now that you have two clans inching towards dislike of one another, there's few things you can actively do. And by few, I mean there's nothing you can do right now. You just have to sit there and watch these two clans start to hate each other because the game thinks another system is more important right now. So I guess we'll just table this for maybe 45 minutes of playtime. When you arrive, people start getting sick and an epidemic breaks out in your community. This is a scripted event in this game to teach you about disease mitigation. For now, all you can do is research and build a medical tent to supply your Floodlanders with prescription treatment and make sure everyone has some kind of shelter, which will help with recovery. Throughout this episode, the clan leaders might bark at you to do something more about what's plaguing your citizens. That something more can be found in the lost screen, which you haven't unlocked yet and will unlock when the epidemic is over. Regardless, Floodland treats disease as disease, so you have to kind of just wait it out. Following the epidemic, let's open up that law menu. And, alright, never mind. Okay. To put it politely, this law screen... Never mind. This law screen is a goddamn mess. Originally I was going to spell out the law screen here, but I realized that'd probably derail the whole video, so I'll push for a more detailed breakdown later. But I'll just say this. The leaders at the bottom left, the leaders of the clan, they're especially chatty on this screen. Almost every icon is a point of debate for these clans, and passing a law they don't like will give them a persistent status effect, like annoyed, potentially increasing unrest each morning. That's what this little red bar is at the bottom of the clan leader's portrait. So to recap, the red bar is how pissed off the clan is, and the blue bar is experience at being pissed off. What the game wants you to do now is to approve legislation to build 2 recreational buildings, either a canteen or a bonfire, but you can also build both if you want. Everyone likes this, so you don't have to worry about unrest via law just yet. Look at him blowing smoke in my ass. Thanks to your decision. For the first time in a long time, we can look ahead and plan ahead without fear. Thanks for this opportunity. Not acting like you don't actually hate me. But by building either, you will provide some down-homey comfort that will increase the satisfaction for each clan, which will give you influence points which will allow you to pass more legislation. So now, lawmaking points is another resource to be generated in this game. Once more, in a bubble, this is a pretty interesting idea, as a gameplay mechanic to represent the consent of the governed, that you can't tell people what to do if you don't provide for them. It also makes sense to have a persistent positive or negative reaction to a law you just enacted. I have a feeling that this is a direct response to how discontent works in Frostpunk. The developers of Floodland may have thought that that system is too superficial, that controversial legislation has a short shelf life in the minds of those affected. However, if that's the case, then the system that they designed merely amplifies the response, so now it seems as though clans get unreasonably angry to everything that you do. That concludes the first act of this game. You should, by now, have a good grasp on how to manage resources, a tentative grasp on how to respond to disease, and a very poor grasp on how to manage clans. Bringing back the clan relationship screen, it seems like the way to improve clan relations is to keep them separated in living spaces and workplaces, and then bring them together in recreation. But I couldn't tell you when that works and when it doesn't. I wish there were tools you could use right now and throughout the game to assist this, so not a law. For instance, like you can't assign clans to housing, and you can only assign specializations at workplaces with that option. Unless you want to sit there and finagle it, I don't know. In short, up to the disease salvo, I was with this game, but I'm starting to get the hunch that something is going awry. Like, was there really no other way to reorder the sequence of events so that the corresponding systems are actually introduced when you can actually do something about them? Is there no way to have it so that Clan B is brought to your settlement, you can see that clans aren't getting along, you can do something to gain influence and improve the relationship, and then there's the epidemic. The next objective is to try to find the silo of a nuclear power plant in the Floodland, and if I have hopefully established a basis for this game, let's turn to Frostpunk while we try to find this silo. Shit, man. After all this time, I'm still getting goosebumps. Frostpunk's alternate future feels like Little Ice Age disaster fiction. The sun is dimming, the world is freezing over, and governments around the planet are fully steeped in violence and starvation and incompetence and ruin. The main campaign of Frostpunk is titled A New Home. I think? Yeah, why not? I don't know. Yeah, why not? You are the mononymous captain, not locatable on the map, but often referred to over the course of the game. And you lead a band of people outside the plagued streets of London to New London, somewhere up north where coal deposits are plentiful. See, your settlement will be built around a gigantic coal generator that will power and heat the city. Luckily, the sister city of Winterhome should be nearby and can lend a hand as you establish your settlement. At the top of the screen, you can see how cold it currently is, and you probably wonder just how cold it can get. To your left are your resources, and it's pretty simple here. Coal powers every heat-generating building, and it will likely become intensely monitored as you play. Wood, metal, steam cores, which are used for advanced buildings and can only be found and not produced. And then there's raw food and cooked rations. At the bottom right, you can see the people in your settlement as a factor of unemployed against total population. Citizens are divided into three: workers, engineers, and children. Workers and engineers are generally interchangeable except in special cases. For instance, only workers can hunt, only engineers can work in medical tents to treat sickness gained from working or living in environments that are too cold. Children can't work at all. Unless that's a bridge you decide to cross. You can also see bars for hope and discontent. If people are fed, housed, and warm, they will generally be more hopeful, though laws and events throughout the game might affect them significantly. In this scenario, there's no gameplay punishment really for low hope, you just have to deal with how awfully you're running this fucking place. Neglect is the surest route to high discontent, which can end the game. But what's there to worry about? Let's build everyone some shelter, gather some materials, building a station where eggheads can research and design stuff, and let's try to find Winterhome. All upgrades in the research tech tree are cleanly laid out and delineated here. Each unlock costs resources and time as your engineers doodle about until coming up with like a coal mine, for instance. You also might want to declare a law. To prevent you from being overwhelmed, a good amount of the law screen is shaded out. So you have an illusion to what path each law will be starting you down, but you won't know for sure. Almost every law has a follow-up that may be a feasible extension of the current one or a descent further into hell. But each law is easy to understand, and it's easy to get a sense for what the immediate benefits or consequences each one will bring. Emergency Shift will have a workplace run for 24 hours once, as in, emergency, but they will not like it. Bare-knuckle fights are a great way of lowering discontent, but people won't blow off steam if it's not in the corona of where they're living. You can get more rations out of raw food by making soup, but people will hate it. This is reinforced by the images that accompany each law. Don't know what adding sawdust to food to extend your food rations look like? Here you go, you fucking psychopath. I don't want to undersell the resource management in this game. It feels involved despite there only being a couple of resource types to really keep track of. To illustrate this, let's do a dummy play test to consider the Coal Thumper. Now the tooltip says the Coal Thumper basically shoots pressurized water into the earth to extract coal. We're basically fracking. Awesome! Coal Thumpers are very cheap to research and build, can be built anywhere, and work indefinitely. So let's go ahead and do just that. Soon you'll have a massive pile of loose coal, and it just needs to be collected. Now you can have people just collect this with their bare hands in the cold, but you should probably use a gathering post where they can warm themselves up. The most efficient setup for the Coal Thumper is 2 gathering posts, which means you need 30 people to make this work best for you. So who will be left to feed everyone? So you might turn to the coal mine, which can add to your stockpile all on its own and only requires 10 of any worker. However, these can only be built where there are beefy enough coal deposits. However, they also use a steam core. Again, you can't make those, you have to find those. So what if you wanted to use that steam core for a hothouse, where if you play your cards right, you could produce food 24/7? Maybe we stick to the coal thumper and send those kids to work. This is kind of a scruples thing than a thing of gameplay consequence, and it might not mean anything to you if this is just a video game, but if you do this, you will lock child shelters in the lost screen. And you might just be able to see it here, but you'll also lock the option to have these kids serve as apprentices down the line. As well, you might fuck up and give these kids double rations, so I hope that hothouse was worth it. So this one choice results in a string of other choices with their own benefits and drawbacks. And overall, there may not be an objective wrong decision, but at any moment in time, there definitely might be a wrong decision to make. Success, in fact, might involve knowing when to implement one or the other, keeping in mind material costs, investment needed in research, and the environmental factors that will affect you now and in the future. You will gain a greater understanding of where and what to implement, and to actually start planning the more you play. And it really feels like Frostpunk's devs considered how each system might play off each other, so kudos to them. Now, back to the story. Building a beacon is necessary to send scouts out into the wastes, so let's do that and get a good look around the area where we've settled. I give Frostpunk immense credit for being the game that gave me, in my adult life, the most emotional response I've had to a game that I can remember. And I'm not talking about reactions that games can easily elicit. Rage, confusion, disgust, shock, vindication, frustration, apathy. The first moment I can recall clearly is your scouts encountering a cave where survivors are hiding out, but they're being menaced by polar bears. At the time you encounter them, a screen explains that if you do not intervene, these bears will reap the men, women, and children inside into tiny, digestible morsels. If you intervene, your scouts may not make it. No, unfortunately the scouts died from the injuries. There's a chance you can safely scare away the bears and rescue the survivors, but there's also a chance your scouts will die heroically saving those inside the cave. A prospect that is so dreary for me that I simply cannot have that happen. Yo, fuck that shit, load it, and try it again. Are you kidding me? I will drop the difficulty right now if this shit is not, if it's just not gonna give me the fucking... Bitch! Okay, for the second moment, let me set the stage for you a little bit. It's winter in New York City, and it's middle of the pandemic. My settlement is going okay. Like, I think we're at pretty much even in terms of food coming in and food being consumed, but Cole's doing okay. And we're about to find winter home. So, the scouts enter the city to find it desolate, abandoned, bodies everywhere. The last entry, God forgive us, we're eating our dead. There is no, we're on our own. The news has shocked everyone in the city. There were supposed to be many settlements and construction crews here, people living normal lives in homes heated by generators, but we're alone. When the news is relayed back, your citizens are rightfully dismayed. We're doomed. We're fucking doomed. What can we do? We have to go back. As they vent, your city's hope meter drops to 0. And I felt a palpable sense, actually, of despair and hopelessness wash over me at that moment. I've never felt so powerless in a game. And that sensation was so effective that I actually had to turn off the game and not return until spring broke out in New York. So, depending on how you approach media, especially video games, you may not have any empathy or even care for a moment like that. And that's totally fine, because I would never tell you how you should get any sort of enjoyment or meaning from any piece of media. Now, it is a scripted event that happens regardless of whatever you're doing, a planned story beat that does remove autonomy from the player because it happens regardless of whatever choices you've made so far. But because the game's narrative is so compelling, I found it fascinating. That's it. So now it's springtime and I've decided to return to Frostpunk. Medium, I think this is going to be the fairer comparison. Medium against medium. The mission now is to regain the trust of your citizens. You can do this through faith or through order. Despite reassuring the people that the hand on the wheel is firm and unyielding, there still is a small faction that pops up and threatens to leave to London, thinking that the devil that they know is better than the devil that they don't. But, sir, you've convinced the majority, but hope is low. A group of our people are still so scared that they want to flee the city for London in 15 days. So use that new tree you unlocked to raise hope, while keeping in mind that failing to do so will cause more people to join that faction. Now viewer, dear viewer, you're very smart, you're very perceptive, you're very erudite, you're very well read. You somehow have 11 points in Fallout in intelligence. How'd you do that? Golly gee willikers, there's no way these well-meaning laws won't lead to a tyrannical nightmare. There's no way, right? I'm sure there's something about a boot stamping on a human face for all eternity, but I forgot what it was. From here, the feeling of hopelessness turned into grating, irritable spite. In counter to what you might think of this, I think this is brilliant. This game filters surviving climate disaster through the lens of Benson from Regular Show. You are trying to convince people that they are really facing a life or death situation, and we will work through this and we can figure it out, but we need everyone here for it. And they respond with apathy and obstinance. And you will say, yo, just fucking leave if you don't like it. This is catastrophe in the shoes of middle management. I know too many managers, and I'm sure you can relate, but I know too many managers that are tasked with motivating a workforce, but deep down inside, you could tell that they really wish to replace everyone working for them with themselves. You know that that just dooms team performance, but you also understand that that's a very easy trap to fall into. I like that there is this huge looming issue in Frostpunk that always sits over the heads of you and everyone living here. And there's limited things you can do, but try to be nice or be hard or be providing or be cruel or be forgiving. But for the most part, people just don't fucking care. And that's not applicable to any concern in the real world or any experience in the real world. That's applicable to damn near everything involving another person. So the simple lesson here is, how far are you willing to go? If everything works out at the end of the scenario, did society survive because of or in spite of what you've done? Did people survive or are they living? How will the next conflict go? All of those points are brought further in relief by the scenario The Last Autumn, which I will only briefly touch on here because I like it, and if you haven't beaten it yet, I urge you to follow it through. But let's finish up A New Home. So you may or may not have declared religious persecution or totalitarianism in your pursuit of stability, and in doing so, you will find hope no longer a problem. People are now devoted to you going through faith or obedient to you going through order. The gameplay mechanic has been lifted off your plate only if you don't think about what led you here. All the people are total in following you without complaint because those that voice a complaint are no longer able to speak. But in comes the closing notes, and they are a doozy. Traumatized survivors muttering about a storm start showing up on your doorstep. You then get the bad news. A big fuck-off snowstorm is coming that will plunge temperatures lower than you have ever seen, and you need to prepare. And oh boy, when the storm hits... The storm hits the city. Oh god, okay. Everything goes freezing, the wind is howling, lightning is striking, the music is picking up, your complaint bar is filled with terrified civilians, and it just seems to keep going and going and going. And the snow keeps falling and it keeps getting colder and colder. And then you glance at the weather bar and you just think, a few more days guys, please hold on, we can do this. And you watch your coal and your rations dwindle further and further. 9 days of coal. I didn't foresee that. I did not foresee that. 3, 4. It's gonna be close. It's gonna be close. And it unbelievably gets colder. And then the storm clears. The storm ends, the winds die down, and the temperature finally starts to rise, and eerie silence descends on the city. Can I turn off? And it's over. You did it! Fails. Then one of the worst parts of this game occurs. While it is cool to see your city built in time-lapse, this game moralizes you for the decisions that you made. You had children working in coal mines, poo-poo you. The public tenants, vigilant faith keepers, masses of sick. And in the, wait, masses of wait, hold up. Wait, hold up. Hold up. There wasn't anything I could do about that. I think this is completely unnecessary. I am aware of what I did, even if there's long gaps between playtimes. But, you know, like I said, I enjoy this game, but I'm an adult. It's not perfect, and I can see the flaws here. There's some shallowness to it. The game is about building to an end state, but there isn't a lot to do when you get there. On normal difficulties, the threat of collapse for neglect is pretty superficial. Discontent and hope are pretty easy to gamify. There might be a point here about how much abuse people will actually take or something like that. There are definite strategies to exploit and metas and all that bullshit. But flaws can be compensated by a good story, especially one that bakes in certain codes of conduct despite not actually limiting activity in-game. For instance, like, you could absolutely kill anyone you choose in GTA 4, but when you're walking around in the underclass shoes of Nico, fresh from the ethnic cleansing jamboree of the former Yugoslavia in the 1990s, and you're looking for a new start in not New York, it feels especially unpleasant. Now, to the last autumn, where I feel the ideas in this game really shine. Your task is actually building the big-ass hulking generator before the weather changes, for a slightly covert arm of Her Majesty's government. Now, this job is straight up Leviathan. It's going to require a lot of manpower, a lot of man-hours, and a ton of resources to complete it. But completion is imperative, not just before the, apocalypse, but before these imposed deadlines come to pass. What's the vibe for this? We could be killed, or worse, expelled. Now trust me, you can get up to some harrowing nonsense in this scenario, but falling behind will just net you a simple screen letting you know that you've been relieved of command. Dozens of employees could die at your hands, but you're just dismissed like some employee let go due to budget cuts. And the idea of corporately managing your way out of catastrophe through increasingly hardline means as the temperature drops and your employee base gets more and more hostile, that's fucking incredible. Speaking of employee base, there are more palpable consequences for ineffective project management here. Namely, low motivation where the work base works slower, and strike risk where you have to negotiate with your workforce in order to resume building. Thus, the emotions felt here are more pitched. The looming threat, a clear understanding of what failure would entail both in the short term and the long term, resources that never seem to be delivered or collected quick enough to accomplish this task, and a population that simply cannot be asked to even consider how dire this mission is. Returning to Floodland, the feeling I get here is that this game is part A New Home and part Last Autumn. Like A New Home, you established yourself and dealt with a crisis that affected your people's health in day-to-day work. Now, in Frostpunk's Sandbox mode and Lisp mode, you also have to deal with reoccurring storms that will affect your settlement, and they will hold up production for a day or multiple days, depending on difficulty and where along you are, which will strain healthcare and resources gathered. And like Last Autumn, you have a giant project that will be the focus of your development. In Floodland, that process is restoring a whole-ass goddamn nuclear power plant. The next few missions are bouts of searching through the wastes, compromising the health of your scouts and your settlement by trying to find a keycard to enter the power plant, finding blueprints for how the thing is built, and then finding energy cells, which have somehow been misplaced from the big turbine of the reactor. This section of the game is a check for your investment in pathfinding camps. Many locations cannot be accessed from the start, requiring either a one-time use piece of equipment, like a lockpick, which needs to be found or researched and produced, or technological advancement, such as climbing equipment. From this point, you are meant to settle on the power plant island by establishing a storage unit somewhere in proximity to the main plant. Okay, let's talk about districts. After a certain point in your technological development, you gain the option to start creating districts and peers. Districts are created by sending a pathfinding team out with a bunch of garbage to a preferred destination. You build a storage and boom, that area is now colonized. Now, each district does not need their own water and food infrastructure. The way to think of storages is to think of a big pneumatic tube system connecting all of them, seamlessly and instantaneously transferring resources from one place to another, except people. You populate these other districts through building piers, which is understandable, but they are expensive in the beginning. Now, resources in this game, some of them are either extremely taxed, such as wood, or not found in the starting island, like a plentiful supply of scrap. so these other districts on other islands become a necessity. Something tells me that it could be possible with a fully equipped pathfinding team to find all the resources you will need in the wastes, but constantly stacking epidemic chances might not be ideal, and likely crash the save. The power plant restoration project is very, very big in terms of what is needed for it. This will be a huge resource sink, both in terms of materials and technology points. To make all the things needed for it yourself, you will need to unlock the totality of the technology wheel, which is 225 points, then the corresponding workshops to produce the material, which is another 135 points for basic workshops, then 100 points to basically learn how the turbine works. The turbine itself requires 25 concrete, 50 scrap, 50 plastic, 50 steel, and the 6 power plant cells to fix it up. Alright, that's a lot. So here's an idea. Research the Scholars Debate in the technology screen so that you can gain technology points independently of finding old world artifacts. Then build a bunch of studies and commit a huge portion of your workforce to just standing around and thinking about how to mix concrete. From there, get your basic workshops for those technologies up and running while keeping an eye on your water and your food levels to make sure that a nice green arrow shows to the right of them. So, I have to ask, does this make sense? Does this make sense at all? We are the stranded survivors of a global catastrophe that melted the ice caps and flooded the land, making food and water scarce. And previously we were sending doofs into the fucking floodlands to grab old iPhones and catalytic converters to drag them back to our home base, and we bust them open with a fucking rock or something because we need to figure out how to build a path. But we were tired of them bringing the bubonic plague back with them, so now we're going to pull a bunch of people from workplaces and send them to a fucking building to sit around all day until someone discovers how to split an atom. And then we're going to drag a bunch of concrete and scrap metal to an old power plant with the hopes of restoring it. Does that make sense? That's what the game is going for. It's giving us the okay to do that. Does that make sense? If you haven't figured this game's gimmick out by now, let me spell it out. You need people, and finding people likely means finding opposing clans. I believe the vast amount of material required for this later salvo is to illustrate the clan system as the most obvious viable way to make what the game wants you to do work. You need a lot of workspaces filled with specialized labor, and you need a lot of food and water and housing to keep them all healthy. Because I've only thought in this game so far through resources, with an absurd number of them accumulating in the top bar, it is way, way easier to offshore each clan into their own district, which will eventually reset each of their relationships to neutral. Then to try and pass legislation that will have them integrate with minimal conflict. So, when you have clans of differing ideologies, it's perfectly valid to offshore them into their own districts and create separate but equal living conditions for them. Really? I figure I should talk about this now. I get the sense that this game wants to make a point. Now, you might be thinking that describes every piece of media worth thinking about, but I mean a capital P point. I mean a message development wants to tell the player that applies to a specific social, political, or economic issue in the real world as a form of critique. Think about food in this game. There are no options for livestock. Instead, we have fish, shellfish, and insects for meat or meat-like nutrition, all of which are generally way less impactful to the environment than livestock, particularly cattle, in the real world. We pick mushrooms to eat. We curiously grow soybeans to turn into soy bread, so, I don't know, celiac or whatnot. There is even an option in the law screen to forbid eating meat entirely, which Liberty-aligned clans will agree with. Now, that's mostly fine because I guess some of that fits the theme. When have a lot of water, have water things. But there are also these illusions that stick in mind most as COVID-era health policies. You can undertake the type of non-aggressive policing that is often spoken about in the wake of the murders of black people in the custody of law enforcement. And the one thing that constantly catches my eye, and I feel like everyone goes to that plays this game pretty immediately, which is approving same-sex marriage. And was this not allowed, so now we can approve it? Who was saying that same-sex couples couldn't get married? I'm confused why this is buried here, and why does this have a status effect? You want to gamify same-sex marriage legislation? Sure, why not? Like, this game seems adamant about things meaning something in gameplay terms, but this is one of those things that I think, if included, should not affect anything at all. I'd rather it be totally up to the player about whether they want it or not as the right thing to do than to have some sort of result to anticipate. But anyway, everything seems to be running fine, same-sex marriage or not. The highest level concern right now is, even if fully staffed and at the last stage of upgrades, the shellfish farms, which don't require resources to run aside from 4 people, are producing enough food to be worthwhile in offsetting the schools of fish that seem to be immediately scooped up by our talented fishers. Aside from that, we need wood. I previously said wood is heavily taxed, and this is what I mean. Wood on its own is required in not insignificant number to construct buildings, usually more than a couple hundred units. But wood also feeds into 2 other resources essential for progression, planks and charcoal. Charcoal being needed to smelt metal scrap back into steel. Both resources have a rate of conversion of about 3 wood units to every 1 unit of those 2 resources. Simply put, you need a lot of lumber. Is it odd that a game set after climate catastrophe makes you deforest entire sectors of the map? Well, the game makes trees a renewable resource, meaning they grow back. You just have to wait until they do. So get used to this. Multiple workshops on pause waiting for trees to grow to resume production. In service terms, the game looks fucking ugly when this happens. You have all these workshops with the pause icon hovering over them, surrounded by a barren wasteland you create to get enough stuff to grow your settlement. So now I have a number of people idle because I'm waiting for trees to grow, and the things that could keep them busy and add to our resource storage also require wood. Speaking of which, there's no independent stockpile outside of your storage. To get more room, you have to build another storage. So we're also at max for a number of different resources because more storages simply cannot be made at this point. But we're moving in the right direction even if that direction is taking in-game weeks. And then the game crashes. This game crashes quite a bit. But this is quite serious. The game can no longer save, both manually or through autosave. Are you kidding me? I'm kind of calling cap on this screen. Oh boy. Okay, so my hunch for why the game is crashing is this. There's a chance that exploring buildings with a disease risk will start an epidemic, but otherwise you will get this notification that says, fever didn't develop into anything serious. Something was glitching out to where I was getting this notification constantly, making me feel like in the background something was stacking up and was overflowing. I could be totally wrong. But a new problem arises that has 2 immediate solutions. Go back to the days of when you didn't have a memory card and try to complete it all in one sitting. Or I could create a new game. Now I am pretty far along here, and I think it would only take a couple of hours worth of playtime to finish up this power plant. So alright, so let's restart. Bullshit! I'm going with the clan that I previously got the furthest with before the last update that added more clans. The Oak Hill Survivors, led by Anna Brown. She is quite literally a cosplay Napoleon, leading the clan with an old world unity alignment. I don't really care for that, but her clan does eat 50% less food. Let's skip the prologue and see what we get. And what we get is this: 2 storages, 1 renovated house as a shelter, a small bank of resources, a specialization in the chamber, and a huge stash of 50 technology points? Holy moly. Holy shit, okay. Now if you skip that prologue, you probably would have no idea where to spend all these, and that if you don't research the study, there's no way to get technology points in the future, aside from completing the quests. So make sure to unlock the study. Also, I can't help but feel this no prologue island is way better than the prologue island. More wood in one area and more schools of fish. So we're doing pretty fine as I restore the radio tower, send out scouts, and find the mandatory second clan. Very suspicious. The second clan is Burkett 3. And to describe their vibe, they come from an oil rig. They're new world unity guys. I don't know how residing on an oil rig oriented them towards some sort of techno-authoritarianism. Maybe this is Peter Thiel's oil rig, I don't know. I never really noticed it before, but what is the clan leader Philip Johnson wearing? What the fuck is he wearing? He's got a poncho, and then under that a jacket, but over that is a shemagh. And then under that a bucket hat, and over all that is a baseball cap. Interesting choices there. The only real difference between this playthrough and the last is that I actually decided to lean into the recreation tree of the law screen. And now it's time to talk about the law screen in depth. So laws here are divided into 6 sectors because everything in this fucking game needs to be organized into discrete categories. These 6 sectors are specialization, custom, authority, security, recreation, and survival. Working clockwise, survival deals with food and water management, disease, and the dead if it comes to that. The first step in this pathway is using less water in exchange for an unrest penalty if there is no water to use less of, which makes sense. You can also find that something that leaders alluded to in the first epidemic in this section. You can enact mandatory masks in a lockdown. But do be warned about the lockdown. It says workplaces will be closed for 7 days and they fucking mean it, putting a tremendous strain on stockpiled resources. You may actually deal yourself a fatal blow through this law. Customs deals with clan relations. You can find that same-sex marriage legislation I talked about earlier here. Authority deals with gaining influence. Security is about dealing with crime, one of the penalties for high unrest. While the loading screen suggests high unrest can lead to tragedy, you'll more likely experience unrest as petty theft from communal stockpiles. Recreation is about clan satisfaction and is laid out in a bizarre snake-like tangle. Specialization is about producing materials and is very opaque and confusing. Laws here are spelt out in detail so fine that I actually consider it pedantic, a result of both an obsession with float variables going up and down and having way too many fucking resources in this game. So when you have high unrest and think about getting some security and you read that the law enforcement is based on the number of those employed against the number of residents in a district and that militias are 25% less efficient at something but can be bolstered up to 6 Minutemen for each station, whereas police are 25% more efficient but can only have 4 working police officers in each station, I think the player comes away with more questions than answers. I read all this and say, even though it's spelled out in the screen, yeah, but what does this do? And that sentiment applies to almost every law here. What is the point? Why should I care? Why does anyone here care? Frostpunk applies its laws with broad strokes. You cannot treat the gravely ill without a law. You cannot take care of the dead without a law. This right here is the system that I understand the least in this game, and if I were to be cruel and arrogant, I'm not sure if the devs understand it themselves. I say it because you lead off with a chart of the clan's ideology, and it's hard to tie this into the choices this game offers in the law screen in a way that makes meaningful sense even though those ideologies are supposed to inform the laws. And you might rely on the clan leader's opinions to be your North Star if the laws prove inscrutable. So now you're making laws to prevent a 20-point unrest bump every morning from an offended clan, as opposed to what the text of the laws actually do. Now, say you started out like me and you have 2 Unity-aligned clans in your settlement. They both would support having some sort of police presence, and you know why.
Fascist.
But here's the thing. Enact police or militia and these Unity clans are glad with your decision, dropping unrest. So, who are we policing now? And if you're doing this to try to counter unrest from other laws you passed, then why the fuck did you pass those? So starting out with 2 Unity clans here, you can make strides towards a socially progressive future. But why would they even offer this as a possibility if that's who you're starting off with? Why would they even consider this an option? And this ties back to the earlier point. Who are we exactly and why are these clans listening to us? Would it be too much to ask to separate laws based on alignment? And when new clans get introduced, new forks or pathways open up, essentially saying that the former clan wouldn't have even thought of those laws if these new opinions didn't contribute to them. And what if the laws that all agreed to are the least effective in terms of their result? That there's something to say for compromise, but the path forward really might mean some of column A and some of column B. And you make it very explicit. Hey, a socialism-influenced even distribution of food and water for all will make everyone work harder, but Unity clans will say, you do that and we will be hemorrhaging food rations. And you know what? We might take those for ourselves. Something like that. I feel a real lack of care or consideration all throughout this system. You have this law here to create a common flag to help unite clans in opposition because they're in clans. But where are the flags? You can bring back the crown, essentially declaring monarchy, as the ultimate symbol of old world right to rule. But where is my cutscene? Where is my little screen saying, all but Anna Brown hates this shit? But for all of this, why even bother with most of the screen if you can simply ship off clans into their own islands? Okay, so that might be expensive, but then why bother if I can repeal laws after a short cooldown after enacting them? I understand that laws get repealed in the real world, but here, it's such a weird, self-debasing system that trivializes this whole process. It makes me feel like this whole thing is actually optional, and you may or may not choose to interact with it as your game progresses. Maybe I just don't get it. Maybe you can make heads or tails of this and you can work it out and get it to sing the notes you want to play. But I can't figure it out. And I can't understand why, in a world completely devastated by climate catastrophe where we have to build society from the ground up, I'm essentially trying to figure out how much coffee to order for the break room under threat of a riot. Maybe Frostpunk 2 will figure it out. We'll see then. I enacted a law I always wanted to enact, which was the creation of pillories. As recreation, which Unity guys like. Pillories are fun to see. I imagine clan members taking turns at them like, those photo ops at Colonial Williamsburg. A nice playground of, capital punishment. I also enacted the gym and the firing range. But what's this? Oh, the firing range requires ammunition, which needs to be made in a steel forge. Which is another fucking resource this game is asking to keep track of. So fuck that. No firing range. And this is goddamn ridiculous, ain't it? Like, I'm not asking you if ammunition should be free or if this is something beyond the pale of a thing that we could make. What I'm saying is that this is way too fucking much. Steel is already expensive enough on its own for rebuilding the power plant, and now you want me to commit a forge to making ammunition so that people can practice at the firing range? For what? For what? So that two clans don't hate each other from the start? Well, you may get an event telling you that a clan is eyeing your settlement. At some point, they may just move in. This was the Children of the Coral from me, a New World Liberty clan who took one look at the pillories in the gym and the practice range and said, never mind, immediately filling with unrest and give me the event that always happens whenever unrest is too high, roughhousing. This event always shows up. Essentially, a clan with high unrest starts throwing hands with another and you need to dole out punishment. If this happens early and you don't have the influence points to tell these guys you're unplugging the Xbox and they need to go to their own rooms, you have to choose an option that will upset one of the clans, which will definitely push unrest to the point where crime starts happening in the district, leading to supplies being stolen. This pathway might as well be set in stone. Unfavorable law plus one other bad event immediately to roughhousing, immediately to crime. Are we finished yet? Okay, found the power plant, found the key pass, found the blueprints, found the nuclear cells, created a district on the island, and after a while I have enough resources to restore the main turbine. And, oh shit, there's more. Okay, this right here. If you got this far in this game, this is probably the moment where you throw up your hands and you say, I'm good. I'm gonna go play something else now. Now you have to restore the old transformer, which is 200 technology points, 50 concrete, 150 scrap, 100 plastic, and 100 steel. Then 3 power relays with a technology cost of 150 points to understand them, and each needing 30 concrete, 100 scrap, 75 plastic, and 75 metal. If you haven't been keeping track, the total cost of restoring the power plant is 165 concrete, 500 scrap, 375 plastic, and 375 metal, along with 450 technology points. Despite the enormous amount of resources needed to do this, it actually doesn't feel like some insane feat of human engineering. Because the time load was placed in accumulating the technology points and making the resources, the actual restoration takes a disappointingly brief amount of time, like 1 or 2 workdays per each. Compare this to the last autumn. Actually getting the material for the generator is relatively brief versus building the thing. All of your workforce working for days getting ill, with you trying in your own way to either offset the dangers of the project or people's responses to the dangers of the project. Here, there's no real struggle, no real triumph. Woohoo guys, we just rebuilt one of the most sophisticated energy generating methods of the past century. Once all of that is finally taken care of, you have the final push. For this playthrough, it's having 150 people in my settlement, all with access to electricity. The nuclear power plant provides 1,000 nondescript units of electricity because of course it fucking does, and each house takes 5. So you think the game wants you to slowly move everyone to the power plant island because there's no way to transmit the power generated from here to the starter island. Which is like, I get it man, but like, come on. Can you, like, not fudge something and say, oh, we found an extant cable network underwater? Like, please? You can also totally undermine the last few hours of the gameplay, because completing the nuclear power plant unlocks the electricity section of the tech tree, giving you access to standalone wind power and a coal generator. Are you fucking kidding me? Alright, fine. Alright, we're almost done. I moved some of the starter island to the power plant island, but I'm starting to get that disease alert problem I previously encountered. Thankfully it doesn't crash the save, but every once in a while someone will just get sick out of the blue and cause an epidemic. Also, let's keep some people on the starter island for wood, rubbish, and fish, and clans living in the outer resource islands can just fucking stay there. Build some wind turbines and power the houses. At long last, I just need to find some people to fill out the settlement, so I explore a ruin and invite like 1 billion people in, but the sustainability of this doesn't matter because this is finished. We are done! I get a summary of what I did. The scientist who guided this venture says that she's off, and the game is over. Yeah!
You! It's done! It's done!
Yeah!
Yeah!
Oh boy, so what the hell happened with this game? Now, to start off, the comparisons I've been making with Frostpunk are a little bit more nuanced than holding up 2 red fruits and saying that they're practically alike. It seems as though during some point of the development of Floodland, they had a big whiteboard and they jotted down all these ideas from Frostpunk, and they just asked whether or not they made sense. It doesn't make sense that scouts can wander around endlessly, so let's add in a carry limit and rations for pathfinding camps. It doesn't make sense that engineers can just come up with these fantastic buildings, so let's have the player find old world artifacts to fuel research. It doesn't make sense in Frostpunk that there are these workplaces that can basically generate resources infinitely, so let's add in a depletion mechanic to workplaces in Floodland. Floodland has a bunch of ambitious ideas, but it's all about execution. That applies to damn near everything in this game. Perhaps the most ambitious being having a giant playfield for the player to explore and to build upon, which has resulted likely in the numerous performance issues this game has. The other is having this seemingly narrative-driven game split off into basically a sandbox mode. After that first salvo, it's basically like, alright, you know what to do from here. I'll be back once you produce like 1 million I-beams. I don't necessarily have a problem with that in theory, but like I said before, it's about how it's done. Number first, Floodland has this evocative apocalyptic setting and does so little with it. What would change if this game was instead set in like an underdeveloped island nation? How would that change the way the game looks, feels, and plays besides the ruins? Not a whole lot, I think. Now, I don't crave end-of-the-world settings as some sort of extension of a natural death drive or anything like that. I think it's fascinating to see how people can use their imagination to depict others adapting to this new scenario. Like the Pit DLC from Fallout 3 always comes to mind. You have this ruined industrial complex, this disastrous slaver and raider relationship, and you have a new mutation that's degrading everything. A setting so grim that the characters in it treat as a game 2 circles of hell, a fighting pit, and the steel yard. Exploring how something like that could be built or can be rectified would be really fascinating for a city builder. So the fact that there's no push factor as strong as Frostpunk's cold, no rising sea levels, no erratic weather patterns, is a real fucking shame. And number twice, there is a real feeling that you're not making any noticeable progress or strides. What the fuck did I do in Floodland? I took clans from ruined buildings and put them on ruined islands, where they may not reap the benefits of the 1,000 units of electricity that I spent so long to get up and running. There's plenty of people still in Floodland that seem to be living perfectly fine without us, to camped out in flooded parking garages and old warehouses. What was the point? You were sleeping under tarps in the beginning of the game, and now you are still sleeping under better tarps now. We caught a lot of fish, but they all came back. We cut down a lot of trees, but they all grew back. Did we make anything better? Did we make anything worse? The clans that hated each other from the beginning probably still hate each other now. I passed some laws, but who cares? Frostpunk makes you feel a real sense of success and accomplishment through a miasma of despair, teaching you that survival is hard-earned, but not without its consequences. What's the feeling in Floodland? Futility. Warmpunk, this ain't. Oh my god, okay. Thank you very much for watching this video all to the end if you've made it this far. Thank you very much to the Slack Shack. The Slack Shack doesn't exist. I don't have any idea of what the next one or when it will be or if it will be at all. I don't want to give any promises. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Get out of here.